The surveyor's stake was driven into the frost-hardened earth, right through the root system of a 100-year-old Jonathan apple tree. A violent splash of neon orange against the muted grays of the winter orchard. Clara stood on the wraparound porch of the Oakhaven homestead, her calloused hands gripping the railing so tightly that a splinter of old pine dug, unnoticed, into her palm. Her father, Sila's, had been in the ground for less than 48 hours. The funeral flowers hadn't even wilted on his grave. Yet here were strangers in heavy coats, dissecting the 300 acres of rolling Virginia hills as if it were a carcass to be butchered. Clara didn't need to guess who had sent them. The sleek, black luxury sedan winding its way up the gravel driveway, bottoming out on the ruts she had been meaning to fill, told her everything she needed to know. The sharks smelled blood in the water, and in this case, the sharks were her own flesh and blood. Clara watched as her younger sister, Brenda, stepped out of the car, followed closely by her husband, Marcus. They looked entirely out of place, dressed in pristine wool coats and Italian leather boots that had never known the indignity of mud. Brenda looked up at the farmhouse, a structure Clara had spent the last 20 years maintaining, with little more than grit and duct tape, and wrinkled her nose. It was the same expression she used to make when Sila's would come in from the harvest, smelling of sweat and sweet fermentation. Clara walked down the steps to meet them, buttoning her canvas barn jacket against the biting wind. She didn't offer a hug. The air between them was too charged with static for pleasantries. Brenda spoke first, her voice possessing a cheerful cadence that felt rehearsed. She gestured to the surveyors in the distance, framing them with her gloved hands as if they were part of a grand artistic vision. "Don't worry about the noise, Clara," Brenda said, bypassing a greeting entirely. "They're just getting the preliminary topography done. Marcus has a developer lined up who specializes in eco-luxury resorts. Can you imagine? We keep the barn for aesthetics, flatten the south ridge for the condos, and turn the main house into a clubhouse. It's going to be spectacular." Clara felt the blood drain from her face, leaving her lightheaded. She looked at Marcus, who was busy tapping on his phone, already calculating the square footage of her life. "Condos?" Clara asked, her voice low and dangerous. "This is a working orchard, Brenda. Dad's grandfather planted those trees. We have contracts with cideries. We have a harvest to plan." Brenda sighed, a long, pitiful sound that suggested she was dealing with a slow-witted child. She stepped closer, placing a patronizing hand on Clara's shoulder. "Clara, honey, the orchard is a money pit. Dad held onto it out of stubbornness, and you enabled him because you had nowhere else to go. But he's gone now, and the will is quite clear. As the executor and majority beneficiary, I have a fiduciary duty to maximize the assets. You've played farmer long enough. It's time to cash out and let the adults handle the business." The words hung in the cold air majority beneficiary. Clara stepped back, shrugging off her sister's hand. Silas had told her repeatedly that the farm would be hers. He knew Brenda viewed the land as nothing more than dirt waiting to be paved. The devastation that followed over the next week was systematic and brutal. The reading of the will was a formality that felt like an execution. The lawyer, a man Clara had never met, read the document in a monotone drone. It stated that while Clara was to receive a modest cash stipend and the contents of the house, the land itself, the title, the deed, the soul of the family was left to Brenda. The reasoning cited in the document was managerial competence. Clara sat in the leather chair of the law office, feeling small and foolish. Had her father lied? Had he looked her in the eye as they pruned the saplings last spring, promising her this was her legacy, all while signing it away to the daughter who hadn't visited in a decade? The betrayal cut deeper than the loss of the property. It tainted every memory, every shared sunrise, every drop of sweat she had poured into the soil. By Friday, the eviction notice was taped to the front door. 30 days. She had 30 days to pack up 50 years of history. The isolation was suffocating. In a small town, allegiances shift with the wind, and Brenda and Marcus had been busy buying drinks at the local tavern, spinning a tale of a benevolent rescue mission. They told anyone who would listen that Clara was overwhelmed, that the farm was failing, and that they were stepping in to save the family from financial ruin. When Clara went to the hardware store to buy packing boxes, the owner, a man she had known since high school, wouldn't meet her eyes. He just slid her receipt across the counter and turned away. She was becoming a ghost in her own hometown, erased by a narrative written by people who didn't know the difference between a gala and a Fuji apple. That night, a winter storm rolled in, rattling the sash windows of the farmhouse. Clara sat on the floor of her father's study, surrounded by half-filled boxes. She picked up a framed photograph of Silas standing next to his prize-winning pumpkin from 1998. He looked so proud, his arm draped around a younger, smiling Clara. In the background, Brenda was sitting on the hood of the truck, looking bored. Clara went to throw the photo into the donate pile, but her hand stopped. She remembered that day. Silas had hidden his blue ribbon inside the hollow of the pumpkin to surprise her. He loved hiding things. He loved games. If you want the treasure, Clarabelle, you have to know where to dig, he used to say. A thought struck her, sharp and sudden. The old grandfather clock in the hallway. It hadn't worked in years, but Silas insisted on winding it every Sunday. He forbade anyone else from touching it, claiming it was temperamental. Clara stood up, her heart hammering against her ribs. She walked into the hallway. The clock loomed in the shadows, a silent sentinel. She opened the glass face. The hands were frozen at 4 o'clock. She opened the body of the clock, where the pendulum hung motionless. At the bottom of the casing, beneath a layer of dust, was a false floorboard. She wouldn't have seen it if she didn't know the grain of the wood so well. She pried it open with a letter opener. Inside lay a thick, leather-bound ledger and a sealed envelope addressed simply, "To the one who stayed." Her hands trembled as she broke the wax seal. The letter was dated 6 months ago. "My dearest Clara," it began, in Silas's shaky, distinctive scrawl. "If you are reading this, that means the vultures have landed. I knew they would. Brenda has the appetite of a wolf, but the loyalty of a cat. She thinks I'm a senile old fool who forgot about the paperwork she slid under my nose last Christmas when I was high on morphine after my hip surgery. I signed her will, Clara. I know I did. I had to get her out of the house so I could protect what matters." Clara wiped a tear from her cheek, her breath hitching. "But a man can't give away what he doesn't own. Look at the ledger. I didn't leave you the farm in a will, Clara. I couldn't risk a contest. I put the farm in a living trust 10 years ago. You are the sole trustee and beneficiary. The deed she has is worthless paper. The farm has been yours for a decade. I just managed it for you. Fight them, honey. Run them off our land." Clara clutched the letter to her chest and let out a sob that was half laugh, half wail. She opened the ledger. Inside were the certified trust documents, notarized, stamped, and ironclad. There were logs of every conversation he had with Brenda, every threat she had made about putting him in a home if he didn't sign over the assets. He had played the fool to outsmart the predators. The storm outside howled, but for the first time in weeks, Clara felt warm. She didn't sleep that night. Instead, she unpacked. She put the books back on the shelves. She hung the pictures back on the walls. She brewed a pot of strong coffee and waited for the sun to rise over her orchard. The confrontation happened 3 days later at the final probate hearing. Brenda and Marcus arrived late, carrying Starbucks cups and looking bored. The courtroom was small, smelling of lemon polish and stale bureaucracy. Judge Reynolds, a stern woman who had presided over the county for 30 years, looked over her spectacles at the assembly. Brenda's lawyer, a slick man from the city, stood up and began a speech about the seamless transition of assets and the benevolent nature of his clients. He spoke of Clara as a burden to be managed, requesting that the court expedite the eviction so development could begin before the ground thawed. Clara sat quietly next to Mr. Abernathy, a local attorney who specialized in agricultural law. He had been Silas's fishing buddy. When the city lawyer finished, Mr. Abernathy didn't stand up. He simply slid the leather ledger and the trust documents across the table to the judge. "Your Honor," Mr. Abernathy said, his voice gravelly and calm, "we move to dismiss the probate regarding the real estate. The deceased, Silas Miller, did not own Oak Haven Orchard at the time of his death. Therefore, he could not have bequeathed it to the plaintiff, regardless of what coerced document they produced." Brenda scoffed, loud and sharp. That's ridiculous. Dad owned that land his entire life. Judge Reynolds opened the ledger. She flipped through the pages, her expression shifting from boredom to intense interest. She adjusted her glasses, reading the trust agreement. She looked up at Brenda, then at the city lawyer. "Counselor," the judge said, her voice icy, "did you perform a title search on the property before filing this petition?" The lawyer stammered, pulling at his collar. We assumed, given the will." "You assumed," Judge Reynolds interrupted. "This document shows that the Oak Haven property was transferred into the Silas and Clara Preservation Trust 10 years ago. The deed was recorded with the county clerk. It's public record." She turned her gaze to Brenda. "Mrs. Harrison, you are petitioning to inherit property that your father hasn't legally owned for a decade. Furthermore," the judge paused, lifting a page from the ledger. "These notes regarding your visits, coerced signatures under the influence of post-surgical medication, this borders on elder abuse." The color drained from Brenda's face so completely she looked like a wax figure. That's a forgery," she hissed, pointing a manicured finger at Clara. "She wrote that. Dad was senile." Clara finally stood up. She felt tall, rooted like the oaks that lined her driveway. "Dad wasn't senile, Brenda. He was disappointed. He knew you needed the money for Marcus's failed crypto schemes. He knew you'd sell the land for parts." Clara looked her sister in the eye. "The orchard isn't an asset. It's a responsibility. One you never wanted until you thought it could buy you a new life." Marcus grabbed Brenda's arm, whispering urgently in her ear, pulling her back. They realized the trap had snapped shut. Judge Reynolds banged her gavel. "The petition is dismissed. The trust stands. And Mrs. Harrison, if I see one more surveyor on Oak Haven land, I will have you arrested for trespassing. I am also forwarding these notes on the coerced will to the district attorney's office for review. I suggest you get a very good criminal defense lawyer." The walk out of the courthouse was the longest and shortest walk of Clara's life. Brenda tried to stop her on the steps, the tears now flowing freely, mascara running down her cheeks. "Clara, please," she begged, her voice dropping the haughty veneer. "We're leveraged to the hilt. We borrowed against the inheritance. If we don't get the land, we lose our house. We lose everything. You can't let that happen. We're family." Clara looked at her sister. She saw the fear, yes, but she also saw the same selfishness that had kept Brenda away for 10 years while Silas withered. She saw the woman who had called the farm a money pit and Clara a charity case. Clara adjusted her scarf. "You're right, Brenda. You are family," Clara said softly. "And because I'm family, I'm going to give you the same advice Dad gave me when the frost killed the harvest in 8. Brenda looked hopeful, her eyes widening. "Work harder," Clara said, "and learn to live within your means." Clara walked to her battered pickup truck, climbed in, and turned the key. The engine roared to life, a rough, unreliable sound. She drove out of town, leaving the pavement behind for the crunch of gravel. As she pulled up the driveway of Oakhaven, the sun was setting, casting long, purple shadows through the rows of apple trees. She killed the engine and sat in the silence. It wasn't the silence of emptiness anymore. It was the silence of peace. The for sale sign was gone, pulled up and thrown in the ditch by Mr. Abernathy on his way home. Clara stepped onto the porch and looked out over her land. The roots ran deep here, surviving storms, droughts, and greed. And just like the trees, she was still standing. She looked up at the evening star and whispered, "I found the treasure."